During the golden age of print media comedy that included Cracked and Mad Magazine, National Lampoon was published from 1970 until 1988, and along the way produced several beloved comedy movies, including this week's episode, 1989's Christmas Vacation, starring Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo. Now, National Lampoon magazine reached its height of popularity and critical acclaim during the 1970s, when it had a far-reaching impact on American humor and comedy. The magazine featured parody and surrealist content. Its issues often had long and short editorial pieces, a section of actual news items dubbed True Facts, cartoons, and comic strips. Most issues also included photo funnies that featured nudity. National Lampoon writers joyfully targeted everyone and had no specific political stance. Therefore, the magazine's humor was often pushed far beyond the boundaries of what was generally considered appropriate and acceptable. And at its peak, National Lampoon produced some of the bleakest and most controlled, furious humor in American magazines. This really was a departure from the Borscht Belt style of comedy popular during the mid-century. National Lampoon's comedy was slash and burn stuff that alternated in pitch, but moved very much on the offensive. National Lampoon's comedy was disrespectful toward everything, and basically, National Lampoon wrote the blueprint for Gen X ironic comedy. The magazine turned out to be a springboard to the cinema in the United States for an entire generation of comedy writers, directors, and performers. Various alumni went on to create and write for some operations you may have heard of: Saturday Night Live, David Letterman, SCTV, The Simpsons, Married with Children, Night Court, and my personal favorite, The Onion, along with various National Lampoon branded films, including Christmas Vacation. So who do we have to thank for this bastion of printed comedy? Though almost completely unknown, Douglas Kenney was one of National Lampoon's originators and developed this highly popular and groundbreaking form of comedy and satire. Now, after working on the Harvard Lampoon, from which National Lampoon got its name, as an undergraduate, Douglas Kennedy, with friend Henry Beard, co-founded the National Lampoon magazine and the National Lampoon Radio Hour. While still with the Harvard Lampoon between 1966 and 1969, Kenney and Beard published a number of one-shot parodies of Playboy, Life, and Time magazine. So National Lampoon began to become an all-time bestseller, particularly thanks to the infamous cover of the gun pointed at a family pet saying, quote, "If you don't buy this magazine, we'll kill this dog." And Kenney began to add his comedic touch all over. He and other members of the Lampoon wrote books, the most popular being the 1964 high school yearbook parody published in 1974. Written like a real yearbook and spoofing all the things that made them almost embarrassing and funny in their own right, they wrote a masterpiece. And as the editor of my high school yearbook for 3 years, I appreciate this satirical take on high school. Another best-selling classic was the cult favorite Lord of the Rings, a humorous take on J.R.R. Tolkien's legendary bestseller that later demanded a reprinting once the 2003 movies became, I guess, a bit popular. Now, in 1978, after the huge success of National Lampoon's Animal House, the company shifted focus from magazines to films. Many consider the glory days of National Lampoon's magazine as having peaked in 1975. But even thereafter, the magazine remained popular and profitable for many years thereafter. Some original editors departed and some new ones emerged, including John Hughes and editor-in-chief P.J. O'Rourke. A more serious decline of the magazine set in around the mid-1980s. Circulation of the magazine had fallen from a high of 638,000 issues to about 450,000. Publishing revenues were down from $12.5 million in 1981. In 1985, CEO Matty Simmons took over as the magazine's editor-in-chief, and in short order, he fired the entire editorial staff and appointed his two sons, Michael and Andy, as editors. I'm no psychic, but nepotism rarely breeds talent or innovation. In November 1986, National Lampoon moved to a bi-monthly schedule, publishing 6 issues a year instead of 12. J2 Communications bought the magazine and its properties in 1990. In 1991, another attempt at monthly publication was made with only 9 issues produced that year. After this, J2 decided instead to focus on just licensing the National Lampoon brand, exhibiting very little interest in the actual magazine. And for the rest of the 90s, the number of issues per year decreased precipitously. Only 2 issues were released in 1992. The final issue was published in 1998. So it's been 26 years since that final issue, but the legacy of National Lampoon is evident in the articles, illustrations, and movies made from the brainchild of its founders, writers, and editors over its 20-some-year history. And in 1989, the company produced none other than National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Now, this movie was based on John Hughes's short, Christmas 59. For its part, Christmas Vacation debuted at number 2 at the box office while grossing over $11 million in its opening weekend. And at the time of its release, Christmas Vacation received mixed to positive reviews. However, over time, many have referred to it as a Christmas classic, and yes, as you hear in this week's episode, it is an annual tradition for our family to sit down and watch this beloved classic. So go ahead and give the subscribe button the ferocity of a fried pussycat so you never miss a thing. We have one more amazing Christmas episode to bring you. We are so excited. We are finally covering 1946's It's a Wonderful Life, the Frank Capra classic. We're going to have a lot of fun. And then in the new year, we have another fantastic slate of movies and content to bring you. We appreciate our listeners, our viewers, our supporters. As you know, new episodes of the Real Relationships podcast premiere every Thursday on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Stay safe, have a fantastic season, and we will see you soon.